Everybody, this is Perch, and this is it's funny when I have an idea for a video in mind. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I need to do that video. Somebody had asked me about it a while back, and I've been meaning to, so I'll get to it and get on that. And then I'm like, I've got to run in and get these groceries. And so when I come back out, then I'll get in the car, I'll record this video. But then while I'm doing the groceries, there's these little events that kind of take place, which almost reinforce the video that I'm about to do in a weird way. So it's like how life all kind of combines and comes together. So anyway, in this case, the topic at hand is, well, basically it's this. A while back, and now I'm talking, if you were collecting comics in the 80s, the general perception, I think the 70s as well, is that, DC were the lightweight comics. They were it depends a little bit on your region who you're talking to, of course, but those are kind of the more silly comics. Those are the ones where, you had the characters had kind of goofier powers, and it wasn't as serious. And Marvel, on the other hand, had more realism. It was more gritty. It was more the world outside your window. It's like it was just a little bit more legit in terms of what it was being put toward. Legit's the wrong word, but just more adult. And then, interestingly enough, in the late 80s and in the early 90s, it kind of shifted around where where basically DC was for more grown-ups, and Marvel was the kiddie stuff. And I remember a lot of DC fans used to make fun of people who bought Marvel comics because Marvel comics were all, basically style over substance. That was kind of the argument. If you want substance, you go to DC. They have Vertigo. They have these kind of more serious, more mature things. Their characters and legacy. There's more respect for it. I've mentioned this person before, but there was this woman who used to come in and buy anything that Donna Troy was in. And one of the things she'd point to is like DC has Donna Troy with all this rich history and everything that's gone on with the Titans and Raven, all this like very cool kind of deep stuff. And then Marvel's doing, many flavors of X books and just a bunch of kind of more silly crap. And it was interesting to see that transition take place of kind of how Marvel was definitely seen as the more grown up book in the early 80s, and then definitely DC kind of took that mantle from them, and then time has gone by. Interestingly enough, nowadays people look at those two and it's like, oh, you like mainstream comics? Oh, you're the loser for liking mainstream comics. Image is where it's at, or crowdfunding is where it's at. And it's interesting how people's perceptions have changed. It's not always fair. In fact, it's not usually fair on the surface, but it's just kind of how things happen. Weirdly enough, so I go into the grocery store, and I'm there I'm buying milk, right? And so I'm just looking for milk. And this person comes up, and it's like, and he's talking to his friend, and he goes, yeah, this is the quote. Yeah, I switched from soy milk to oat milk. I'm lactose intolerant, and I had to switch from soy milk because, my bros were saying that soy milk was gay milk. And I'm sitting there, we're all masked, we all are wearing our masks because it's Washington, you have to. But I'm like, this is where the mask is like a huge plus, because you can give whatever kind of crazy face you want under that mask and nobody knows, right? So I'm just like, what? It's like there's a sentence that came out of somebody. I'm trying to really wrap my brain around these two having a conversation, first of all, like this in a store, and then two, just like somebody, like you switched from soy milk to oat milk because people were calling you gay for drinking soy milk? Like that, I'm sorry, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, I mean, if you're lactose intolerant, then what? You don't want to basically crap yourself by drinking milk. So you should drink whatever will keep you from having stomach problems and diarrhea or whatever is going on with lactose intolerance. But whether or not somebody calls you gay is somewhat irrelevant to not wanting to crap your pants, in my opinion. I would happily, I will happily take being called gay over crapping my pants. I don't know about you guys. Maybe everybody's a little different. But then your solution was to switch to oat milk. Anyway, so that's the first part of the conversation. I'm like, oh my God. And then the friend goes, Well, oat milk is better for the environment anyway. The soy stuff's killing all the rainforests. I'm like, what? I'm sorry. Is this? Do people know about this? Is this whole thing? Oh my! I mean, what in the world? I mean, way too. I'm like standing there going, do I want the 1% or the 2% here? I don't know. It's 1% or 2%. Never in my mind had it entered in, which milk choice was going to make me more or less gay, or which one was going to be better or worse for the environment. I mean, that was not part of my decision process. But anyway, that's where we are today as a country. But it does sum up, I think, this whole idea of which comic book do you like and which company do you support. We're seeing a little bit of that now, and it is irrational. I think there are people who will object to being to saying they support Indiegogo because that infers that they are right wing or white or whatever it happens to be. I mean, it's ludicrous because if you look at the projects on Indiegogo, there's plenty of projects there by all numbers of people, races, sexualities, genders, etc. It is not the white bro platform. Anyone who says that is it to me. The reason I conveyed the story about the grocery store is listening to that. Hopefully, the majority of you find that absurd. I find that absolutely and completely absurd. When somebody is talking about Indiegogo versus Kickstarter for ideological reasons, like the Indiegogo platform is the hate platform, or the Kickstarter platform is the socialist platform, I know that the woman who is doing Kickstarter, and maybe the new woman too, as well, who knows, have blocked people and thrown off campaigns. I know that's a policy issue. That's substantive. I totally understand that reason for disliking the platform. You don't need to come into the comments and explain it to me. I get it because there's proof to that. There's actual, there's a history. There's something real that you can point to. What I don't understand is somebody saying, well, Kickstarter is socialist in general. That's just kind of absurd. Or Indiegogo is right wing in general. That stuff is the absurd stuff I'm talking about, not the actual policy change. Also, like I did an earlier video, there's a person I know who won't do Indiegogo because the way they pay and the way they do the campaigns doesn't work for him for his finances. Substance. I totally get that. Totally makes sense. But the Marvel DC argument was often irrational like that. It was kind of silly. Either you like the comic, you didn't like. Judging the whole company by whether it was more grown up or not and has been absurd. Today, if you like Marvel comics or you don't like Marvel or DC or whatever it happens to be, I've come to this point where, as a company, I find it useless. I know at one point you had Marvel Zombies and whatever the DC equivalent was, but I don't think about comic publishers that way anymore. I'm not sure who can. They're all publishing very different things. There's lots of comics within their line, all across the board. I think to play DC and Marvel against each other, just it feels like a very quaint, very old topic. I mean, Marvel and DC, for that matter, don't even do that to each other. I mean, once upon a time, there was a good rivalry. You could pick a team between Marvel and DC and kind of go with it. And the companies themselves kind of encourage that. But these days, there's no. I mean, those days are long gone. There's zero chance of Marvel and DC ever working together again because of who they're owned by and because of the media properties and how much it would entangle rights and other things. Nobody wants to do that. The day of the crossover is over. But getting into the rivalry just sounds like somebody arguing over soy milk versus oat milk. I mean, who cares? I bought 2% for that, for what it's worth. Anyway, it's I don't know. Do any of you still care? Does anybody remember this perception? If you happen to be collecting comics in the 80s or the 90s, do you remember how this was? Where Marvel was more grown-up book and DC is more kiddie book, and then it kind of flipped. Do you remember? Do you guys remember that rivalry? Do you remember just one of them? It was a very interesting time in comics, but I think that is all gone now. But anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I just find the whole thing kind of silly at this point. I think you kind of have to just judge individual comics because the companies themselves are in many cases, a mess. I don't even know where that would all begin. And by the way, is oat milk more manly than soy milk? Is that a thing? Did I miss some kind of memo or joke that I don't know? Did like the quartering talk about oat milk being the Chad milk? And is that what I don't? Anyway, somebody let me know. Thanks for listening.